where real people, real faith, and real conversations collide. From culture and current events to the deeper truths shaping our world, we don't shy away from the hard questions. We face them with hope. So take a breath, open your heart, renew your mind, and see life from a higher perspective.
Welcome, everybody, to The Heavenly View, where we talk hot topics from a world and Christian perspective. My name is Krissy Amos.
And my name is Hannah Hayes, and we have an excellent show for you today. Today we have Ms. Donna Brosemer from the Volusia County School Board. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're so glad that you're here. This is a very near and dear topic to my heart and to Hannah's as well, as I have kids that are in our Volusia County schools. I have an elementary age student. He goes to Spruce Creek Elementary, and I also have a daughter who goes to Spruce Creek High School, and she's a freshman this year. So the school system is very near and dear to my heart, and so I'm really thankful that you were able to take the time to come in and chat about the who, what, where of the school board.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So, Donna, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, how long you've been doing this, what made you want to do this, just a little bit of your heart.
I'm never sure where to start with a question like that. I worked in public policy for about 30 years. I got into it by being the dreaded community activist. I was involved in local issues, and some of them had to do with my kids in school, but most of them, frankly, had to do with land use and related business issues.
Right.
But my very first lobbying job was for Palm Beach Community College, and of course, that's higher education, but because of our relationship to K-12, I became familiar with K-12 issues, especially as it related to the kids coming into the community college system, and also as it related to state policy and the interrelationship of all of the levels of education. I always thought I wanted to be a teacher. Life went in a different direction. I'm a total grammar Nazi, so I love the 9 to 13 age group. That was my favorite age group with my own kids, and so I thought I wanted to teach middle school English. Anyone who ever heard that thought I had lost my mind. And it happened that I didn't get to do that anyway. But I did serve on a number of education-related boards in my travels. I served for 10 years on the Palm Beach County Education Facilities Finance Authority. And so we took information from the various education institutions in the county when they wanted to add a facility or remodel or anything like that, evaluate their proposals, their plans, their revenue streams, and whether they could pay their bills and that kind of thing. So I did that for 10 years, and then Governor Bush appointed me to the State Board of Independent Colleges and Universities. So I served on a board that oversaw all of the non-public universities in the state, Embry-Riddle, Stetson, University of Miami, as well as the smaller ones. And as it happened, two of the universities I graduated from, because I got my bachelor's from Barry University and my master's from Lynn University. So I was on the board that oversaw
That's
both
awesome.
of those too. And I served on the Higher Education Facilities Finance Authority, which was a higher level of what I had done in Palm Beach County for 10 years, evaluating the proposals of the various institutions for renovations that they might want to do or additions to their facilities. So I had sort of a broad basis for understanding the role of a board as it related to the function of an education institution.
Right.
So when I retired from public policy and came back to Volusia County, I had lived here 10 years ago, I happened to make the random comment to my husband that I could see myself someday serving on the school board here. And I applied to be a teacher. They very wisely never called me. And so instead of being a teacher, I subbed. And after 6 classes, I realized that was not where I belonged. And when the opportunity presented itself to run for school board, I decided that my background was a better fit for the board than it was for the classroom. So here I am.
Here you are. And how long have you been serving now? Because there's terms to...
Just a year.
Just a year.
Yes.
And what is the role of the Volusia County School Board?
The role of any school board is to set the policies by which that district functions. And then the role of the superintendent is to implement those policies. So we do the umbrella structure. I relate it to the Constitution and statute. We do effectively the constitutional part of it. We establish the policies. And then the district comes up with rules that implement rules and policies that implement those policies.
Okay. And how about the State Board of Education? How does all of that coincide together?
The State Board of Education has everything to do with our curriculum and our overall structure. And so they create the framework under which we function as a district. We are levels of seniority, if you want to put it that way.
Okay, awesome. All right, so what do you feel like has been the biggest challenge in the last year then being a part of the Volusia County School Board?
School boards around the country are challenged in a number of ways. We are still dealing with the repercussions of the COVID shutdown. So that is still a challenge because not all of the kids who were in the system before have come back into the system. Our student population is actually lower now than it was 10 years ago by maybe 10, 12,000 students. Some of that is because of school choice, but not all of it. And so that has been an issue. But overall, funding is a chronic issue. And there is a natural tension, too, between school boards and superintendents or district administration that I think is a chronic, that isn't related to COVID at all. That's a chronic structural situation that I understood intellectually but had not personally experienced until this last year.
What kind of tension would that be?
My impression for a long time that has been very much validated in this last year is that school board members don't really necessarily have a full understanding of their role. We are directed in some respects, by Florida statute, and I don't think this was intentional, but it has happened. We are directed by, in a number of ways, to defer to the superintendent. It's assumed that because the superintendent and the district leadership have the degrees and have worked in the system, that they're the ones who know how everything is supposed to be. And so we as board members are supposed to take our direction from the superintendent. And that's not the role of a board.
It's supposed to be the other way around.
Correct.
The superintendent should be taking from the board.
Well, in my only personal conversation I've had with our superintendent, which was immediately before I was sworn in, so a year ago, I made the comment that I answer to the voters I, as a board member, answer to the voters, and she answers to the board. That comment didn't seem to go over well. And as I've spoken with other superintendents, I've had the distinct impression that they do see themselves as the instructors of the board rather than the other way around. But if you think of local government, for instance, you have, let's use the county council as an example. The county council is elected by the voters. They establish the policies by which the county operates. The county manager implements those policies. So we as a board are in a position similar to the county council, and the superintendent is in a position similar to the county manager. That doesn't seem to be the way it plays out in everyday application for school districts.
I'm sure that can make things very challenging within the board. How many board members are there?
We have 5.
Okay.
And I will say 4 of them are very comfortable deferring to the superintendent. We are taught by the Florida School Board Association that if we have a question about anything, the superintendent should be our source of information. And I don't disagree with that up to a point, but when you only get your information from one source, then you don't necessarily fully understand the issue. And so I think that is a fundamental error.
And for someone who doesn't or hasn't been involved with the school board, doesn't know anything about the school board, you said that the school board takes their direction from the voters. Who are the voters?
In my district, I'm in District 4, and so in my district, it is those voters because we vote in single-member districts. So we don't have an at-large member. It's not countywide. School board members are nonpartisan, so anyone from any party can vote for us, even in the primary. And so we are, we answer to the majority in our district. And the demographics of each district may vary. So you may get a variety of opinions. You hopefully will get a variety of opinions depending on who those voters choose in each district.
And what about the superintendent?
In what respect?
How does she get to where she's at?
In Volusia County, we appoint our superintendent. We hire the superintendent.
The board does.
Correct. There are counties in Florida that elect their superintendent, and that creates just a whole host of complications because the superintendent and the board may be elected by entirely different kinds of voters, with different messaging, different priorities, and how they work it out is beyond me. We very fortunately do hire our superintendent, and I think that creates a much more workable system.
And is there an amount of time that the superintendent can be in that role? Or since it's hired, it's just until they either move on or they get moved on?
It's by contract.
I like the way you put that there, Hannah.
Superintendents do sometimes have very short lifespans in a particular district, but generally speaking, it's structured by contract. So in our case, the initial contract was for 3 years, and then a year ago, a new contract was drafted, and the board majority approved a new 4-year contract. So
now it's been extended an extra year.
Well, it's been extended an extra 4 years.
Extra 4 years.
Yes.
And who decides that?
Generally speaking, it's in my experience with any board, when the CEO effectively is up for renewal, when the contract is up for renewal, the board either has a committee or the board itself discusses what the terms should be and what have you. We didn't have that opportunity in our case. The board, to my knowledge, never knew that the contract was being renegotiated. Wow. And it was given to us as new board members at our very first meeting to approve or not. And I hadn't even seen, when I was first contacted by the board attorney, who kind of gave me the overview, we have another contract. It's really minor changes. We compared the salary with other similar counties, and so there's a bump in the salary and a few changes in some of the benefits, and it's for 4 years instead of 3. But we have to, and the contract isn't up until next June, and this was in November when I was hearing this. But we have to do this now. And do you have any questions? And I said, well, I haven't seen the current contract and I haven't seen the new contract, so would you send me those? He did, and ultimately I was not comfortable voting for it, so I was the only no vote.
And what about that contract made you uncomfortable to vote yes?
Initially, it was that we had not been given enough time to have any idea whether it was whether or not it was a good idea, because it had never been discussed by the board. There had never been any public conversation about its provisions, and then as I looked into it, I went back and played. I played the video. It's very fortunate that all of our board meetings are videotaped, and so you can go back and
watch them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I made a list of all of the counties that were used. There were 7 counties that were used to come up with a number for the salary that was in the contract. 5 of those counties were similar in population and the superintendent's salary. They were similar to ours, and that would have been fine had we used those 5 counties. Then she would have had a modest increase in her original contract amount. But that wasn't what we did. We tossed in a couple of bigger counties with much higher pay superintendents, and that changed the number considerably. Now, had I known that going in, I would have been able to say this number is not appropriate for this reason. But I didn't have that opportunity because we were just given this at our first meeting with no other discussion.
So it sounds like maybe one of the biggest challenges then, as you're sitting in that seat, is really the amount of time you get to communicate with one another and look over policies before you vote on them.
We actually, because of Sunshine Law, we can't communicate with each other. And one of the things that I have found to be a challenge on this board that is different from previous boards I've served on is that we don't really have much discussion about anything. There might be some back and forth, but we don't challenge whatever the premise is of what's being presented to us. Only on very rare occasions. And I'm never comfortable with making such large decisions on the basis of maybe just a PowerPoint presentation. Just accepting the surface information that you're given without having a fuller understanding of the subject matter. And now that we have many of our staff, 110 of our staff, were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, so they can't even fully give us information unless the district has told them they can. It's very awkward for a public agency to be in that situation. We're a public agency funded by public dollars. They are public employees. They are public records, and we have no access to them except under very limited circumstances.
Wow.
Wow.
And who's creating the policies that you guys are voting for individually, really?
Theoretically, the board votes on them. I don't actually know who writes them. Our attorney his title is that he is general counsel for the district as well as the board attorney. But the board doesn't have any attorney-client privilege. So if we question anything that's coming before us, that conversation can be had with the district leadership, but the district leadership point of view is not brought to us as board members, at least not brought to me. And so because there's a natural tension between what the district leadership might choose to do and what the board might have preferred, there's really no ability to reconcile that. So I guess the short answer is I don't know who writes the policies. They are brought to us. I will back up for just a second. Just as an example, our student services, our student code of conduct was completely rewritten by our student services department. I have no doubt that that's appropriate because they are the ones who implement the rules and they're guided by the attorney who's telling them what statute requires, because there were some statutory changes that had to be incorporated into that new code of conduct. So I guess it depends on the subject matter and who drafts at least the outline of what the rules are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So with this vote, you had to vote on very quickly involving the superintendent, her contract, the renewal of her contract. Was that the same time that the new contract for teachers was happening too? Is that around the same moment?
No. The superintendent's contract was adopted a year ago, almost a year ago. I'm going to say either December or January, December of last year or January of this year. The teacher's contract was, the negotiation began in the summer, and it's always a bit contentious, but the fact that the superintendent got an 8.7% increase in her contract, and that the district had just achieved, according to state calculations, had just achieved an A rating. It was very hard for the teachers to accept the 1.5% that the district initially offered.
Yeah, so I actually got to go back and watch the video from one of the school board meetings, and they were protesting. The teachers were protesting outside of the meeting. They had the whole room, I think, was full of teachers sharing testimonies, because at the end they get like 3 minutes, I believe, right?
Correct.
3 minutes to go up and share their heart and how they feel about the decisions that are being made. How was that for you to see? Because this was a pretty big deal.
It was. And I came into this with a belief that has been validated in the time I've been on the board, that our teachers are overworked and underpaid, and the conditions in which they teach would be considered a hostile work environment under most circumstances. That is not to say there aren't great classes and great schools and all of that. The district is always telling us about all of the good stuff, but they don't want to hear that we have teachers regularly getting beaten up by their students, being cussed out, having the amount of disruption by students in classrooms is part of what keeps our proficiency rates lower than they should be or would otherwise be.
Right.
And more obligations, especially in terms of documentation, paperwork, reports that teachers have to do, in addition to the normal grading of papers and things like that, all of that has really piled on to their workload with no compensation for the time that those things take. So they end up working outside their contracted hours.
Right.
And they aren't compensated for that either.
Right.
I just felt that when they came in and told their stories, that was one of the hardest evenings I've ever spent on the board because they don't make this stuff up.
Right.
We hear about it periodically through the year, but every teacher who comes in and complains in public comment is either taken aside before they leave and told that they shouldn't be doing that, or they're approached maybe by their principal or by someone from the district and lectured after they've done it that they should not be coming to the board meetings. The only reason they do it is because they have
They don't know
exhausted
what else to
every
do.
other option. They
Yeah.
have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think our teachers deserve much more respect,
Right.
much more accommodation. We need to be meeting their needs so that they can meet the needs of the kids. And I think we fall very far short in doing that.
I don't disagree. It was pretty heart-wrenching to hear some of the stories that they talked about. A lot of most having, multiple jobs, and
Yes.
even some were selling plasma to be able to pay their
Wow.
bills and things like that. Teachers that have been sick and have cancer and still working. I know my son's principal had cancer and she continued to work. It was so sad to hear all of their stories from all of them, especially when our economy, it's increasing. Our cost of living is increasing every single year. Anywhere from 2.5 to 3% every year. The percentage that was approved for the teachers was what did you say it was? 1.5?
Initially, it was 1.5.
And did they get health care too? I couldn't remember whether or not
they do
got
get health care or
insurance.
health insurance. We changed companies last year, and so I think the jury is still out on how well that's working. But they do get that as a benefit. Some of their benefits, I think, were increased a bit in this new contract. But the bottom line is that they need relief in ways. They need more help in classes. We have classrooms that are way over the class size requirement, but the way the state calculates it allows the district to average instead of you can only have 17 or 18 students. If you have a number of classrooms, you can average the number of classrooms and students so that you have more students in your classrooms than the state says you can.
Wow, loopholes.
wow.
Well, it is, and it's the state's fault, but we make use of it. And so we have teachers with 35 students.
Wow.
And in a lot of cases, we have teachers who have students with multiple disabilities in the same classroom, sometimes multiple grade levels and multiple disabilities.
Wow.
And how those teachers manage that is just beyond me.
Yeah, there were some teachers that did come forward and speak at that meeting specifically about that, about how multiple grades are going into one classroom. I know in my daughter's school, because it's a pretty big school, Spruce Creek High School, it's pretty big. I know they have a ton of kids. I want to say at least 30 kids or so in each classroom there. So that's a lot. They hold a lot of responsibility to these kids. They work so hard. And I also think that the caliber of teacher is also directly influenced by what we're able to provide for them as well. I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but you're going to get teachers. When you take better care of your teachers, you're going to get better education from your teachers. They're going to give more. They're going to be happy. They're going to, take pride in going to work every single day, knowing that they're there for those kids. They're supported, that they're respected amongst their peers from the board. And it's going to make their work better with each one of those kids. But the lower the bar is financially, the worse they feel and the less we get.
That's true. It makes recruitment difficult, and it makes retention difficult. Retention is difficult from a couple of different angles. Our veteran teachers who have been teaching for a long time have a frame of reference that the new teachers coming in don't have. So when they see the disruptive students and their lack of ability to control a classroom because of the current structures, they know this isn't how it has always been,
Right.
and so they start to retire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's they want to stay. I hear from them all the time that they would love to stay, but they've had enough. And sometimes they come and say that in public comment, that they just can't take it anymore. Then we have the young ones coming in, and they may or may not stay because they think that what they're seeing now with the disruption in the classrooms is the way it's always been and the way it will always be.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's like, I didn't sign up for this.
Mm.
And so we become just a stepping stone to something else. And so they stay for a year or two, if that. We have some who haven't even stayed that long. And then they decide to move on. It's on us to make the conditions in the classroom better for the teachers, and that in turn makes it better for the students. The students who want to learn greatly outnumber the students who are disruptive, but the disruptive students take all the teachers' time and take it away from the rest of the class.
Mhm.
And, oh, sorry, go ahead.
What do you think was the point in decline in the school system, like for the teachers to be having the time that they're having now? Why? And the teachers who knew what it used to be like, where's the wrench?
You mean, what was the first step off the cliff here?
Right.
I'm going to date myself. I have had this opinion for decades now, but I believe that the first step to the disruption of the culture of a school that I grew up in was getting rid of dress codes.
Mm.
Because once we did that, people behave according to the way they're dressed.
Mhm.
You know, you are not going to wear the same outfit to play baseball that you wear to go to a dance or go to a bar or a movie. And once we relaxed the dress code, then the behavior started to change.
Mm.
And then we moved into the more, let's say, the more progressive behavior policies. And let's just talk about things. And let's think about why the student is behaving this way. You know, when I was a kid, you stop the behavior first. You figure out the why later, but you
Right.
stop the behavior
Yes.
first.
Yes.
And because we had decades of not doing that, the culture in the classroom has just deteriorated over time. And it's difficult to reverse that. There's also a different level of parent involvement. When I, again, I'm going to date myself, but you know, when I was in school, there were fewer moms working.
Right.
And now with two parents working and being kind of overwhelmed themselves, there is less attention paid to what goes on in the classroom and what their kids are doing. And there is also, and I think this is critical, somewhere along the line, and I wish I could tell you more specifically where this happened, but I think it was more of an evolution than anything else. When a student is disciplined now in school, the biggest problem that the teacher has is that the parent blames the teacher.
Yes.
The parent calls and yells at the principal says, back off. That is a problem for the teacher because that completely eliminates the teacher's ability to control a classroom. And so the parents play a fundamental role in that by effectively encouraging or setting the example of disrespect for their children to the teacher.
So in Christian households today, we're seeing everywhere. I know a lot of my friends have moved this direction. I went to a conference recently. They had someone who came and spoke specifically on this topic, but nowadays in Christian households, they're being told and encouraged to now pull their kids out of the school system and place them either homeschool, private Christian schools and things of that. I think that's great if they can do that to bring their kids home and be able to give them that education, but I don't think that fixes what's happening with all the other students that are not growing up in Christian homes. But what would you say to this kind of movement of, bringing Christian students out of the school? And why should Christian families reconsider this and keep their students in the schools? Because it is wild these days. I mean, I think every day there's a student that's like making a false claim, saying that they're going to come and they're going to shoot up the school and all of this stuff. We see it all the time. If anyone follows Mike Chitwood, you'll see every day almost there's a new student making threats and stuff to schools. So what do we say to the Christian families that want to pull their kids out of the school? What do we do there in that gap?
The only way to change the school system is to stay inside and work it. I understand a parent's desire to pull their kids out, and I support their ability to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Having said that, the kids whose parents don't have that option, whether it's financial or logistical, or they aren't involved enough to know that they have that option, whatever their reason is, or their fundamental belief that they're paying for a public education, so they might as well be sending their kids to public schools. The kids who are not pulled out deserve every bit as good an education as the kids who leave and go to another school. Mm-hmm. And what bothers me is the notion that the only way you can get a better education is if you go somewhere else. We have both the ability and the obligation to provide a healthy, solid education in the K-12 system. And one of the reasons I got into this in the first place, I think this was one of the things you said we would talk about. I didn't go to college until I was 40 for a variety of reasons, but I had two small businesses before that, both successful. I was a property manager. I owned some of the properties, and I contracted to manage others for about 10 years. And for another 10 years, I owned a landscape nursery.
You've done it all. Donna does it all.
Well, it's one of the advantages of being of advanced years. If you're around long enough, you get to do a lot of stuff. And so I had those two businesses, and the reason I was able to have them and be successful at them was because I had a great K-12 foundation. I went to school in Seminole County and then graduated from high school in Dade County. But I had a good K-12 education, and I frankly didn't need to go to college. The only reason I went was so that I would have the credentials on paper to say that I could do what I had been doing. I had also, at the same time that I had my landscape business, I was a paralegal. And I did that for 8 years. And so I was able to do all of those things because I had a K-12 education, except that nobody wanted to hire a paralegal if it didn't say that you had those credentials. So I went to school and got the degree
Right.
that said I could do what I had already been doing. But it was K-12 that got me there. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have an obligation to stay in the system and work with it. We need the involved parents to help us make the system better. And I would be grateful for any who are willing to do that.
So how would they do that?
That's a really good question. We have, the way we are set up right now, we have one school board meeting a month and one workshop a month. And our workshops are generally just presentations. We don't actually discuss very much. But watching the agendas, they come out a week before each meeting, and you can get them on the school district website. But watching the agendas, staying abreast of the subject matter, coming in public comment and raising issues, asking questions, being involved is on a fairly consistent basis is the greatest help. Most of us get interested in a specific issue, especially if we're angry. Angry voters turn out the most. Angry parents are the ones you hear from the most. But it's really helpful if parents can, on a steadier basis, pay attention to what we're talking about so that they can ask informed questions. And quite frankly, the best responses from the district are brought out by those who come to the meetings and ask questions or make comments in public comment. During the budget hearing, just as an example, one of our board members said, well, apparently nobody's worried about how we spend our money because nobody showed up. Look at this room, it's empty. And yet we have a $1.4 billion budget and very little ability to figure out where the money goes because by Florida statute, that line item budget doesn't have to be posted on our website in the same way that a local government's has to be posted. So, so we get blocks of spending, but I don't know where the money's going unless I go and sit at a district office and say, would you pull up the budget for me so that I can go through the line items? That's not something that I can do on a regular basis, where there might be times when I'm home and I have a question about a certain kind of spending, or any parent at home might want to know. Can't do it because Florida statute doesn't require it.
Wow. So you said the information for the agenda of the following week is on the website.
Yes.
You can see it all on the website so that we can become more educated on what's being discussed.
Yes, and there are attachments to the documents attached so that you can read what the agenda item is about.
Okay, and then at the end of the school board meetings, you get an opportunity to be able to speak, right? Like we were saying before, you get like 3 minutes to be able to speak. Now, if you have questions and you're asking questions, are those questions able to be answered by you guys at the time? Or do they ever get answered? What's the process on that?
We are not allowed to respond to anything that is said in public comment. Occasionally, something will be brought up where one of the board members will say, I would like to have your name and contact information follow up with you. But for the most part, the subject matter is just brought up and the board listens and the next person's card is read.
And when you say the next person's card, so those comments and questions, don't you have to fill something out first to say that you want to comment on something, or can you just show up and talk for 3 minutes?
You can just show up, but when you show up, you fill out a card.
Okay.
And you say what agenda item you want to speak about, or there are several opportunities for public comment. If it happens to be that you're commenting on an agenda item, you say which item it is. Otherwise, at the end of the meeting, you can comment on anything that's education related.
Okay. And being on the school board, even though you guys don't respond to the 3 minutes, does it get discussed?
Sometimes. It depends on whether a board member takes a particular interest in a subject that was raised. I know I've done that a few times. And I know a couple of the other board members that come to mind have done that. When someone raises a subject in public comment, the board member might bring it up later on and want to pursue that subject. But for the most part, if there's going to be follow through, it might be that the person who came and made public comment will then have to pursue it and make sure that there's some kind of follow-up.
Wow. See, and I think a lot of people, they don't realize it. They don't know what to do, or whether or not their voices will even be heard, even if you go, are they being heard? But I guess if you go enough times and you put yourself in a place enough times, eventually it will get talked about. And I think a lot about, there's a Bible story about a mother and her son, and the mother goes before the judge over and over and over and over and over again until he gives her what she's asking of. I kind of think about it in that perspective when it comes to that. Sometimes we just need to be persistent in what we're passionate about and be educated and come and spend our time there at the meetings and email as many people on the website as you could find and just try to get your voice out there. I know there are organizations like, I think it's the Liberty Moms.
Oh, Moms for Liberty.
Moms for Liberty. So they're very involved in the culture of our policies in our education system.
Correct. Yes. And they're a good example of going repeatedly to influence the direction of policy. And they've been very effective in being able to do that. I was thinking too, just on a more personal level, as an example, I was contacted last spring by moms from one of the elementary schools in my district with concerns about how the gifted program was being handled. And over time, I met with the moms. I encouraged them to contact. The chain of command is generally you go to the principal first, and then if that isn't satisfactory, you go on to district staff. They had already been to the principal when they came to me, and so ultimately they came and spoke in public comment and raised their issues there, and their issues were addressed in very short order by the district. It can be done, and I always appreciate it when district staff takes those things seriously. We have some very good staff members who are very responsive. It doesn't always happen that way, and so the repetition for emphasis is or the squeaky wheel is appropriate.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about these things and educating us and the viewers on how they can get involved and what it's really like to sit in that seat. It's a lot of pressure. And so we're definitely going to be praying for you. And I think just to speak really quick to the Christian families out there that are pulling their kids out and homeschooling them, just don't forget the kids that are still there. And, there was a time when, kids learned to read from the Bible and the 10 Commandments were in the schools and they had prayer every single day. And I ultimately think that when we took God out of the schools, that's where things really started to fall apart. That's my personal belief of that. And so I believe, though, that if we get back to that, we get back to praying for our schools, praying for people like Donna, who's standing in the gap for us there, mostly alone, who's standing in the gap, who, is a believing woman. We need to be covering her in prayer. We need to be covering our schools, our teachers, our superintendent. We need to be covering those kids in prayer every single day, because ultimately at the end of the day, it comes down to Jesus and him alone. And we're all going to stand before him one day. And so today is the day, right, that we need to be getting involved. We need to spread God's love with each other. and building his kingdom. And he loves the children.
May I add one additional point about how to help?
Yes, please.
During the campaign, I was often asked, because the majority of active voters are over 45, their kids are gone, their kids are already in college, or they're married and their grandkids don't necessarily live here. And I was frequently asked why that voter should care because their kids aren't in the school system. But every service that's provided to every one of us is provided by somebody who came through the K-12 system. The voters matter. And so even if the voters not directly influenced by or engaged with the school district, their vote matters because the economic base of the county depends on an educated population. Our crime rates are lower when our population is educated, and so everyone needs to care whether or not they have kids in the system. The parents are our first line of priority. Yeah, but it matters for everyone.
Absolutely. And we're called to care.
Yes.
Each one of us are called to care.
Yeah.
So thank you again, Donna, for coming on and being a part of this very special episode.
Yes.
And we thank you guys all for watching. We just hope that you enjoyed this time, that you will like, comment, subscribe, share with all of your friends so that we can make more content like this. And we'll be back next week with new guests and new topics right here on
The Heavenly View.
Bye, guys.